You think you know, but you have no idea. Remember that
Yeah.
MTV, like True Life?
Is that from
No,
MTV? At my undergrad, that was something that was said a whole lot. So maybe I guess they stole it from MTV.
it was those MTV True Lives, and the tagline was you think you know, but you have no idea.
Hi, I'm Kim.
And I'm Camille, and this is Enneagram for the Culture, where two dope Black therapists discuss how therapy, Blackness, and the Enneagram come together,
How they all touch.
how they all mingle. Here we are, episode 2. So we, for this episode, wanted to jump into the main question of what is the Enneagram? Because even though we've been in this world for years now, we understand that for some, they've never even heard of this, or they have heard of it and they have no idea what it is. So we wanted to kind of do our own episode explaining what it is.
I think we may be a little nervous because there's so much information. And so we want to do our best to make sure it's digestible and we don't lose you guys. So bear with us. But we decided we wanted to just go ahead and name that, right?
Yeah, classic therapy language. We just wanted to name that for you. We wanted to name that for you and for us, that we are nervous, that this could be a meaty episode with a lot of information, and we don't want it to feel overwhelming. Suggestions to make that easier is start and pause as much as you need. And I'm a visual learner, so it sometimes might be helpful to, however you're listening to this, if you have a chance to actually pull up a picture of the Enneagram. So if you just Google Enneagram, go to images, that way you can kind of visually see what we're talking about. That's helpful for me as a visual learner.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. We're going to add some resources we said to the show notes too. So if there's something you feel like you miss, obviously you can go back and listen again, but we'll point you in the direction of some resources that we know are that we find to be helpful. So you can use those as well.
Yes. And also, big caveat, we also want to give you permission. Again, great therapy language. We want to give you permission that it's okay if you don't understand everything that we're saying right now. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about are stuff that in layers we learned. So if you grab something new in this episode, then that's great. Next time you listen to something else or learn something else, it's okay to learn it later.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my family likes to go to wineries, and we always like to go on a wine like tour of the winery. And there's so much to learn about wine, and sometimes I'm like, we've heard this before, but then there's also like one thing that you learn new just to like learn something extra, but because you're not going to get it all in one wine tour. You're going to get it in like 20 wine tours, and it might be just this new fact. Maybe the Enneagram is kind of like a wine tour.
Maybe the Enneagram is kind of like a wine tour. Maybe it is.
Or like a brewery tour. Like, once you've been to one, you've kind of been to them all, but you don't get all the information in one brewery tour. You get it piece by piece by going to multiple brewery tours.
I like what you did there, sis. That's a new analogy. But I'm with you. I'm with you. Point is, take your time. I heard somebody teach that it's like slow, like this type of work, it's slow, it's deep, and it's steady. And so I like to remind myself of that too. We've already talked about rabbit holes and how it can be a lot. So yeah, we're gonna take our time.
We're gonna take our time. So we'll start off with, what is the Enneagram? What is it? And the Enneagram is a personality typing system that breaks down personalities into 9 distinctive types, and those are represented by numbers. So 1 through 9, and they each have their own differences, motivations, the way that number thinks, feels, behaves, is represented in each of those numbers. The word Enneagram You got this. What is it? If you want to break it down.
Yes. So any we talked about this in the first episode, how like looking at the word Enneagram, how it can be kind of intimidating, but when you one have heard how to say it a few times, then that goes away. And then also understand what the word means. So you put me on this. I'm pretty sure it's Greek for
Mm-hmm.
8. For 9.
For 9. Yep.
So to represent the 9 types, and then gram being drawing. So that's what the actual word means. So now you don't have to be intimidated by it anymore because you know what it means.
9 drawing. And so, right, if you went ahead and Googled it really quick, you'll see that it is in the shape of a circle and it has 9 points. And those are the 9 different kinds of personality types.
Yeah.
One of the favorite things I learned pretty early about the Enneagram, and it's something that has stuck with me, is that the 9 types are kind of like when you go to the hardware store and you go to pick out paint and you know that you want to paint your wall blue. You go to the blue section and there are 50 shades of blue, more than 50. There's like thousands of shades of blue, but they're all blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the green section. There's thousands of greens. That the 9, because sometimes when people just say here 9, they're like, what? Everybody falls into just 9.
Right.
And it's like, no, because if you're a 1, there's all these different flavorings of a 1, which we'll kind of touch on, that make it so that you're still a 1, but you could look very different than someone else that's a 1. But you're going to have some of the same core stuff.
Yeah, I love that paint analogy. One of my favorites is the glasses. So if you think about the 9 types, and types, I've learned is short for archetype. So another good thing to Google is what does that mean to be an archetype? These types are representative of all of the types across all of humanity. So no, we're not trying to say that there are just 9 different types of people walking around across all of humankind, like Camille said. Even as you get to know or break down each type, there's just so many ways you can have 2s who look so different. And we'll, like she said, we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts that help you understand why that is, including like subtypes and wings and all of that stuff. So, but I had not heard the paint analogy. I really like that one.
Yeah. What were you going to say about the glasses?
Oh, glasses. So it's like 9 thank you, 9 different ways of viewing the world. And this can go back to the relational part of what we love about this tool. So me being a 3 and knowing Camille is a 7 and knowing what I know about 7s, I can kind of put those glasses on and have insight into what it's like to see things the way she does. So just going back to it lending an opportunity for us to be more graceful and compassionate and understanding.
Yes. So that's what it is. So let's go ahead and actually dig a little bit, scratch the surface on what the 9 are and what they're driven by, and what they're called. The driven by, again, we're going to say this so much. It's that is what makes the Enneagram really special, is that it talks about the motivation for a number and what drives that number. And so we're going to touch on that. We're also going to touch on the fear for that number. Mm-hmm. So we'll go around the circle. So we'll start just in order of 1, because it feels organized. But we call the 1 is the reformer, or sometimes referred to as the perfectionist. And their drive is to have integrity, and their fear is of being bad, corrupt, evil, or defective. And that number can sometimes, because of those 2 things, can kind of deteriorate into critical perfectionism. So that's a 1. If we move on to 2, that one is called the giver or the helper. And the giver, the helper's desire is to be loved. Their fear is being unworthy of being loved. And that sometimes can start to look like the need to be needed, for 2. 3 is going to be called the achiever. So we're going to call, what'd you say?
You blanked on the 3.
I did blank on the 3. I'm sorry, Kim. So the achiever, and their desire is to be valuable, and their fear is being worthless or without inherent value. And sometimes that can start to look like chasing after success. For a four is called the individualist. And that one is a desire to be oneself or to be unique. And their fear is being without identity or personal significance. And sometimes that can look like deteriorating into self indulgence. Five is going to be called the investigator. And a five's desire is to be competent. And they fear being useless, incapable, or incompetent. And that can sometimes look like useless specialization. A six is going to be the loyalist. The six is the loyalist.
Yep.
And a six is going to be have a desire, be motivated to be secure, and their fear is being without support or guidance. And sometimes that can look like an attachment to certain beliefs, a strong attachment to beliefs. Seven is called the enthusiast or the epicure, and they have a desire to be happy. They fear being deprived or trapped in pain, and sometimes that can look like frenetic escapism. An eight is called the protector, and that one's desire is to protect oneself. They have a fear of being harmed or controlled by others, and that can deteriorate into constant fighting. A nine is called a peacemaker, and that is a desire to be at peace. They have a fear of loss of connection or fragmentation, and that sometimes can look like stubborn neglectfulness. So those are all of the 9 types, what they're driven by, what they're called.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Good job, Camille.
Thank you.
So the names, um, I think it's worth it to mention that they can be different based on what you're reading or who you're learning from the source, but those that they change.
Yes.
And so for that reason, when I teach or coach, I try to stick with just referring to the numbers to minimize confusion. But I love, those names, those words. They describe characteristics um, of each type.
Yeah. But language is important. So it is good to stick with the numbers, and or some of the numbers really have a collection of names. And so you can identify with what name you like for
Hmm.
that number.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
of the names people actually don't connect to, and that can be
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah,
tricky.
yeah.
Do you find that with threes? Because
I
threes
was
can kind
gonna
of
say
have a
I
name.
don't like,
Yeah.
yeah, this notion of being a performer that doesn't
Right.
that doesn't doesn't resonate with me, especially being probably my four wing, authenticity being seen as, real, like that's very important to me. So when I hear a performer that doesn't resonate. Achiever though,
Mhm.
does, because I know that it's important for me to get stuff
Yeah.
done.
I would say, yeah, for me, for seven, usually it's the enthusiast. But I like the word epicure. I just think it's a great word. And um, I think it further explains the number.
Yeah.
So I like both of those. Shocker. I like both.
Mhm.
um,
That's like it does, and we've heard that, right? Or learned that like sevens, you mentioned um we mentioned it's being okay to like take our time with this process, and because it might take some time to land on your type, but
mhm,
sevens sometimes like they tend to be a type where that is not always the case. Sevens can land on their type somewhat quickly because there's a lot about sevens that you like about your type, right?
mhm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I love being a seven. And I think that there is some school of thoughts that sevens, for the most part, really love being sevens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whereas there's some numbers that
Mm-hmm.
when they find out that they're their number, it's a very painful process.
Yeah.
But for sevens, I think it's great. And I don't know. I wonder if sevens are the most, yeah, sevens are probably the most hype about their number. Like, who's
Yeah.
the most enthusiastic number? The enthusiast, the seven. So,
Exactly.
so
I see what you did
we're
there.
all in. And I would say that, you know, with that piece about sevens probably land on their number pretty quickly, as I think um there's some numbers that are very obvious, I think, and sevens are pretty is a pretty bold, um, loud number. Some we're
Yeah.
not all loud, but it is I think an easy structure to pinpoint, and I think there's others that are easy to pinpoint, and then there's some that kind of classically are hard to pinpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that they usually it's kind of a known thing that they're probably going to struggle to find their number because of the way that they're structured, which is
Right.
kind of interesting.
It is. And it goes back to, as an enthusiast, like one of the reasons that's not the case for sevens, because they're enthusiastic about their types. But yeah, you take like a 9, for example, who's one of the things I love about nines is their capacity and ability to see things from everybody's perspective and have an appreciation for it. And so because of that, it can be a little bit harder for nines to settle on their type because they can kind of, it's easy for them to have an understanding of why people think and feel and do and are motivated by what they're motivated by. So you can see nines, it can kind of take a while.
100. I mean, they're the peacemaker, so they see exactly all the things that you said. So, yeah. So finding your number, right? So we're talking about how finding your number can be really easy for some, and it can be really hard for some. So that leads us to that question of how do you find out your number?
Mhm.
And our top, the world that we live in, we like things fast. And so there are personality tests about the Enneagram. And so we can actually, in the show notes, we'll drop our favorite Enneagram test um, because there's lots, but there's some that we like more than others. But as a whole, I would say that both of us agree we don't love the testing for your number as the best practice to find your number.
Yeah.
It's one practice, but it's not. I would encourage folks to not just stop at the test, because the test can only test how well you know yourself, how self-aware you are,
Mhm.
and because the Enneagram is so driven by motivation, if the question is you are going on vacation and you like to have an itinerary, yes or no? I could say yes, and Kim could say yes. But
Mhm.
the reasons why we have an itinerary is very, very different.
Mhm.
And so it's not getting into the why I did that behavior. A test is not going to get that easily.
Mhm.
And so you could get mistyped if you do a test and leave it there. So the way that I like to suggest folks when I'm working with clients or friends is to say, go ahead and test because again, we live in a fast-paced world. It's fun. So take the test, but then whatever results you get, go ahead and then read about the numbers and really learn what are the motivations, what are the core beliefs, so that you can sort of start to get to know the numbers more and narrow them down. But the test can be a kind of a little bit of a jumping off point if you
Yeah.
want, but definitely do not make the test your stopping point.
Right.
Um, just sort of start there if you'd like.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree with all of that and pretty much the same approach. Great place. Test can be a great place to start. And I mean, you have different types of tests. Like Camille said, you have some that are can give you very, very detailed results. And then you have some that are pretty simple. Either way, just not the place to start and stop. Start with the test because it may potentially point you in the direction of what your type may be, or at least where you can start to do some more digging and exploring. But for sure, what's really going to confirm what your type is would be those motivations, having that understanding of what's going on at your core that's driving some of your behaviors and patterns. That's what's going to really let you know what your type is. And there's not a test that can do it. This is also why a person can't tell you your type, even as a
Mhm.
therapist or an Enneagram coach or teacher. We might have an idea of like what department you may be in, but ultimately only you can confirm which type you are because only you have that awareness, that internal awareness, which is also something I think that's pretty different. That makes
Mhm.
the Enneagram pretty different from other tools like this.
Yeah, I would agree with that now that you're saying that. So when we're saying get to know your motivations, ways that you can do that, again, we'll drop all of these resources are different. There's tons of Enneagram books. There's tons of Enneagram Instagram accounts. There's tons of there's Enneagram songs. And then there's Enneagram podcasts like ours. And so, or working with an Enneagram coach. But even just websites. So looking at the numbers, learning more about them. So that's how you find out your type. Anything else about that, Kim? Finding out your type?
Mm, I'm pretty sure we've already said this, but it might take some time, and so
That
that's
takes some
okay.
time. Yep.
Um,
And a range of time, I like to have some limits on that, just so that I'm like, what does that mean? A week, or does that mean like forever? I have a very, very close best friend who is very self-aware. She's a therapist as well. She knows herself, and it took her a good year to really land on a type. So you can be anywhere in that range or longer. So don't think that, oh my gosh, this is taking me 2 months, something's wrong with me. No, that sometimes for some people it does take a little bit longer. Some people it's immediate. Don't let that scare you. But just so that you know that it's literally sometimes a journey to find your number.
yeah, yeah. Um, we're gonna get into wings, arrows. Sometimes I find that that can be impactful when you're trying to like take a test to figure out your type. Um, so like what I found with clients or even helping friends figure out their type is like if they take a test and they get their top three, oftentimes their wings are somewhere in those
Mhm,
top three results.
mhm,
Or if you can pay attention to kind of where you are in your life. For example, if it may be a more distressing time for you,
mhm,
how that can kind of skew what the test says. Again, we'll get into arrows, but um, by um, some theories or some ways is this the Enneagram is taught is, when you are in stress, you go take on some of the characteristics of a different type. And when you're in growth, you take on some of the characteristics of another type. So just think about that if when you're taking this test and looking at some of this information, trying to figure out what your type is, if you're in distress, then you may kind of lean more in the direction of your
mhm.
stress arrow or your stress number. And so all of that can be impactful. So just more reason to know that it might take some time, and it can be helpful to have conversations with people who know you well, um, or a professional to help kind of process and sort through some of this stuff.
100. I think that so with that, the wings, arrows, we're already talking about stuff that again, if you don't know the Enneagram, you're like, what are you again talking about? So and all of those, again, when we think about those paint colors or the glasses, wings, arrows, triads, subtypes, all of those kind of things are different flavors
Mm-hmm.
that you can kind of add into the number that make it unique. So we're going to kind of break down some of that, some of those popular words that people talk about when we're talking about the Enneagram that are part of the flavorings of the number. So the first one is wings, which is a very popular thing that you'll hear. So you'll hear people say, I am a 7 wing 6. And you'll sometimes even see it written out 7W6. And what that means is when you look at the circle of the Enneagram, the numbers that are right next door to you are called your wings. So if I'm a 7, there's a wing that's a 6 and there's a wing that's a 8. And I have a dominant wing. So I lean in one way, a little heavier on that side. And so I take on some of the characteristics of that neighbor. Now, wings are not static. You can lean either way. So it doesn't have to be that you're a 7 wing 6 for the rest of your life. You are your number for your whole life. So I'm always a 7. But my wing can look a little bit different depending on what Kim was just
Mm-hmm.
talking about, different times in my life, different parts of my life. I might lean on my 8 wing professionally,
Right.
and I might lean on
Situationally.
my 6 wing in different situations. So the wings are not necessarily 100% static, but you can have a dominant one. And that does flavor
Yeah.
what the number looks like because I'm going to be taking on, again, some of the characteristics of my neighbor um, on either end. So that's what the wings are.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful job. I love the flavor. Like that's how I explain it. Thinking about your wings is kind of like seasoning, salt and pepper, and then kind of they add flavor to your type, which would kind of be the entree.
Mhm.
Um, I think
Sometimes people would joke and say like, I'm a 7 wing 7, right? Like kind of joking that like they are just that number, but that's not all the way true. But I just love that joke when people do that.
yeah, it sounds like a joke or something.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Love you, friend. Okay. Um, so wings and then arrows. So arrows, they work kind of like the wings, but also kind of different. So the arrows, they're not your neighbors. If you did what Camille suggested and you have an image of the Enneagram pulled up, some images capture this and some don't, but you'll see arrows pointing away from and to each type. And those are known as growth and stress paths or directions of disintegration and integration. Um, so I explain this in two different ways. One, in the way we just did. So you have growth and stress. Or another approach is to consider them as just access points, right? So a view of the Enneagram that I really appreciate is that if anything at any point feels like it's limiting, then that's not the point of the tool. It's all about expansion and growth and not boxing in and not feeling limited. Um, and sometimes I think that the growth and stress, teaching it in that way, it can feel limiting. So another way to think about it is just that those are additional access points, much like your wings, um, your stress and growth path. Those are access points that you can kind of take on some of the characteristics for those types, some of the energy, another word for those types. So yeah, you can consider that both like when you're in distress or growth, or just generally. So for example, as a 3, my growth arrow would be to 6 and stress path would be to 9. So what that can mean is when I'm in distress, I can kind of take on some of the characteristics of 9 in that I can kind of numb out. I can just kind of go along and not really speak up about my preferences. I can just kind of merge and just go with the flow. Um, and then 6 being path of growth, I can kind of take on some of those characteristics, healthy characteristics of 6s when they are loyal and really, really valuing and prioritizing their relationships and bringing something to those relationships. So that's an example of what that looks like for me as a 3, again, with that growth stress perspective. But then there are also things about 9s, healthy 9s, or things that I appreciate about 9s that I can absolutely tap into and see in myself. For example, really preferring for things to be peaceful and cool and comfortable. I'm very, very preoccupied with like my space looking a certain way and feeling a certain way. And so that I consider that to be a strength. So just an example to show that I don't have to be in distress to be able to access or tap into some of the characteristics of that type.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that we can use the arrows in a way in the wings, but we can use the arrows. I like the language of borrow from. So I can borrow from
Mhm.
my either end of my arrows, and I can take on some of those characteristics. And I can take on those characteristics in a positive way, and I can take
Mhm.
them in a negative way, regardless of if that arrow is a stress or a growth place.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so yes, so I don't think you need to get too stuck on um this is an area of disintegration or just an area of stress. Part of why we don't love that, again, like she said, if it feels limiting, then that's not cool. But also because we want to use the Enneagram as a compassionate place. So
Yeah.
it's not cool if I say my stress arrow as a 7 is a 1. It's not cool that I say, when I'm really stressed, I take on the negative characteristics of 1 and I get really critical and I get really like black or white in a very negative way. That's not kind to a 1. Like that's not
Mhm.
a 1 now feels like, well, damn, like that's not a cool way to look at it. But I can notice that, hey, I'm leaning a little bit heavier into this place. And actually, can I use that one place as a place of strength again? So maybe when I am stressed, I can actually use the one, I can borrow from the one to say, hey, how do I organize? How do I look at things a little bit more clearly instead of getting all up in my head and kind of frenetic? So it can be both and.
Yeah. Yeah. I too I like borrow from a lot
Mhm,
also. And you help me realize how, when it comes to the six for me as a three, how that's the case in a conversation we were having
mhm.
about how I tend to like really love for there to be like structure and organization and processes. And I love like creating systems. Like it helps to ease my own anxiety and makes me to feel much more settled and competent. And you help
Yeah.
me through conversation realize that some of that good stuff, that the stuff that we love and see and appreciate, that I can borrow from
A
sixes.
6.
Yep.
Absolutely. So they're just the arrows and the wings, both of those are access points. They're ways that you can borrow from. They're ways that you can lean into those numbers as places for you to grow. They're also sometimes a little bit flags. So
Mhm.
I can start to notice just just that if I'm shifting and I'm acting a certain way, I can kind of it's almost like an alert system of,
Mhm.
ooh, something might be going on here that I want to slow down on or take a look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I love how that, going back to how we use it in practice, how that shows up in working with clients. Like it's so
Yeah.
helpful for eights, for example, to be able to notice when they're
Hmm.
really in their head, and
Mm-hmm.
to hear them be able to say like I could feel it and I could see it, and I felt like I was kind of in that five space, or
Mm-hmm.
um that five energy. And yeah, it can be a signal or an indicator, that it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. And just brings you more. Again, one of the great things about the Enneagram is it just gives you more awareness. And so all of this just gives you a language around that awareness. And so that you can know yourself
Mhm.
and know your patterns. Um, with the arrows and the wings, so the Enneagram, we're going to jump into what's called triads. And there's lots of ways, we're just going to do triads, but there's lots of ways that the Enneagram can kind of be broken up into segments. But we're just going to stick with the triads because that's what we like and it's very common. And so the Enneagram is 9 numbers, and different parts of the Enneagram um, get broken up into triads. So there's the heart, there's the gut, and then there's the mind. And those triads deal with a different core emotion in a certain way. When I learned about triads, this was something that also really opened up the Enneagram to me as something that felt very legit. Just the way that I started to see how these numbers interact with those parts of themselves and then that emotion. So we'll start with the gut triad. And so our gut triad is going to be 8, 9, and 1. And the gut triad, or kind of the body, they sort of take in information and energy with their body. So they, as a clinician, when I have an 8, 9, or 1, I'm very aware that they usually are very good somatically. They know how to touch base with what something feels like in their body because they are a little bit more attuned to that gut somatic body sensation. And the emotion that they're sort of working with in their own special ways is anger. So we won't get into the hows of each one, but anger is sort of the running emotion between the three, um, and whether they withdraw, move close to that, or if they sort of have this weird in between relationship with that emotion. The second triad, or another triad, is the heart triad, and that's going to be our twos, our threes, and our fours. And our heart triad is going to also deal a lot with shame. And all three of those numbers have a unique relationship with shame and the way that they either move close to shame, withdraw from shame, or have an in between relationship with shame. And as a heart triad, they are more in tuned or very closely attuned to their feelings. and to their heart space. That is a driving place for them. And then our last triad is going to be the head triad. And that's going to be our 5, 6s, and 7s. And that is going to be folks that are the thinking triad. So they're thinking. And the emotion that they sort of runs through all three of them is anxiety. And they all three have their own unique relationship with anxiety, whether they move close to it, move away from it, or kind of have it in between. So that thinking head triad. The gut triad is also like a doing triad. And then the heart triad is a feeling triad. And the 5, 6, 7 head triad is the thinking triad.
Yep. So and those are the instinctual triads. Camille mentioned that the Enneagram is broken down into different triads. And so the one she just highlighted, those are one set of triads. And so now I'm going to talk about instinctual subtypes to just make you even more confused. And I'm joking, but not really, because subtypes, I think, can be kind of confusing or intimidating for people. It feels like people kind of tend to steer away from talking about the instinctual subtypes, and that's a bit of a bummer to me because they're so important. And even, we mentioned that we want to do our best to like stay away from typing people because you can't. There's no way that you as an external person can know for sure what's going on in a person's core. You might feel like you have an idea, no matter how much you know that person, though you don't know. But
you think you know, but you have no idea. Remember that MTV, like, True Life?
Is that from MTV? At my undergrad, that was something that was said a whole lot. So maybe I guess they stole it from MTV.
It was those MTV True Lives, and the tagline was you think you know, but you have no idea. And then they would do a whole, like, I mean, for folks that didn't grow up with MTV True Life, which is a lot of people because we're old,
I was just about to say, I feel like we might be aging ourselves. Certainly.
We're definitely aging ourselves. And they would do a deep dive on an important issue, whether it was like, well, Teen Mom started as a True Life. The TV show Teen Mom. I'm digging into my pop culture love. So Teen Mom started as True Life. I'm 16 and pregnant. And then people really became a whole series. But it was, you think you know, but you have no idea.
Yeah. Well, that's it. So you walk around thinking you know, but you don't really know. And so try to remember that as hard as it may be to resist telling somebody else what their type is, or even typing them in your head and then interacting with them like that. Really try to not, because you may think you know, but like Camille told us, you have no idea.
You have no idea.
When it comes to those subtypes, though, the instinctual subtypes, that's a little different. It can be a lot easier to gauge and have a sense of what somebody's subtype is. And so our subtypes, so there are 3 basic ones. And going back to why this is so not about putting all of humanity in 9 different boxes. I mean, if you just do this math right here, if we're saying that we all have a dominant type, plus we have these 2 wings, and then we have the stress and the growth arrows. And now on top of that, you have these instinctual variants. So we all have these 3 variants in us, these 3 instincts in us. And that is self-preservation, social, and sexual, or one-to-one. So if you just do 9 times 3, that's 27. So just to reiterate that this is not about trying to put everybody in one of 9 boxes. So yeah, each person as an individual, we have all 3 of these instinctual variants in us. And I think the best way to think of it would be in terms of layers. So your dominant instinctual variant would be the one that's at the top. And I've mentioned, for me, that's self-preservation. And so what that means is people with this particular variant, that's kind of the lens through which they see the world. Is for self-preservation, it's all about, what is it going to take for me to be comfortable, for me to feel like I have my needs met. It's that main instinctual variant, it tends to be the one that was most distorted as children. And so it results in this kind of preoccupation with this variant. So for me, I grew up pretty, pretty privileged. And I had pretty much everything that I wanted, and most of my all of my needs were met, and most of my wants were met. My parents worked really, really hard to make sure that happened. But for both of my parents, they grew up pretty poor. Um, and so, though I didn't necessarily grow up struggling, I did grow up with parents who kind of had a preoccupation to make sure they worked really hard to make sure all of our needs were met. And so, that's how I see the world as well. It's really important to me to make sure I'm comfortable and everything that I feel like I need in order for me to live, those needs are met. So that would be the top layer for me. And then everyone has a second one. Um, and then your third. So a person with this dominant self-preservation instinct, they walk into a room and they're paying attention to things like temperature, snacks, seating, where they're gonna be the most comfortable, perhaps, if they feel like they really want to dip out, is their seating arrangement, is it close to an exit? Those are the kinds of things that really leap out or are important to a person with a dominant self-preservation instinct. And again, I can be a self-preservation three, and there's a three who has a dominant social instinct. And so you're hearing, because of that difference, we're going to look very, very different. So a person with a dominant social instinct, they are going to walk into that same room, and what's really going to leap out at them is who's in the room and how do they connect with who's in the room so that they can really feel like they are meeting that need for a sense of community and connection. For a person with a sexual or one-to-one instinct, it's going to be kind of similar, but more so from an individual standpoint. One-to-ones or sexual instincts, they're all about kind of who in the room has this juice, this energy that I can like sync up with and really feel energized by. So that's a little bit about subtypes. It's really, really helpful and important to know for yourself, for some of the reasons I just offered, but also again, going back to relationships, so if you are, again, self-preservation, but you're in relationship with someone who has a dominant social instinct or dominant one-to-one instinct, it's going to be really helpful for you to know that and understand that so that you can, again, see things through their perspective or understand why some of the things that are so important to them are so important to them. And instead of feeling like you're judging them or you don't get them, it's an opportunity for you to be able to understand.
Yes. Yes. Um, you did that, girl. You just did that. Like,
Yeah, it felt like it was a lot.
You did it though. You explained it. So the way that also the thing is, again, we all have them in us, like she said, and so they get stacked. And so you have that dominant. So again, for me, I'm also self-pres. And then you have the third one, which is your repressed one. And that's the one that we sometimes kind of feel like we can just throw to the side. It's kind of the one that we kind of are like, nah, that's not important, or that's not as important. And so our repressed one also gives us a lot of information about, again, that self-awareness, where there's maybe some places that we aren't even like a little bit of a blind spot,
Yeah,
or a place that
definitely.
feels uncomfortable. Whereas again, that dominant one is going to be the one that we sort of feel like there's never enough of it.
Yeah.
There's never enough. And so as both of us as self-pres, right, we're really looking at how do I take care of myself, and you know, food, money, rest,
hmm
those kind of basic safety. And so I'm going to be driven to always really prioritize that.
hmm It's interesting. I think I've learned that you can kind of sync up. Like if you pay attention, you can have a tendency, like when it comes to some of your relationships or friendships, um, to be attracted to or
Mm.
connected with people who have similar or share the same dominant instinct. Like
Oh,
most of my friends are self-preservation.
I really, really like that. I
Yeah.
really agree with that. And I would say, I don't know, this would be something for us to research, but I would say that probably the majority of my family, so my family of origin, is probably self-pres.
Mm-hmm.
But we're all four different numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But that if we are all walking into a room, we're looking at the exact same thing of
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen here. And so I wonder if there's a little bit more genetic crossover on
Right.
those subtypes as opposed to numbers, because a thing that we haven't said yet, right, is that you don't necessarily pass your number on to your kid. It's not
Right.
like if I'm a 7 doesn't mean that my kid is going to be a 7. It could be, but it's not something that's passed down. But
Right.
I really very much might definitely pass on the self-pres tendency, because I'm going to be like probably teaching that.
Yeah. 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 And I think again, the whole point of Enneagram for the culture, to be able to talk about this through the lens of race,
Mhm.
and just how we are socialized and what's taught to us from that standpoint or from that perspective. Something
Mm.
else, one other thing that's really interesting about subtypes, I think, so while when it comes to family of origin or even friends, you may see a lot of similarities, but I think oftentimes in like romantic relationships, there's
Okay.
a pattern where who you attract, it may be your more repressed dominant instinct. I think I saw that conversation going down in um, one of the communities that we're connected with some of the therapists in there. It's
And
true
what
for
was the
me.
answer? Because it's true for you?
Yeah, yeah. So my dominant instinct is self-preservation, middle is social, the third for me would be one-to-one, and my husband is his dominant is one-to-one or sexual. He's just
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
this scares me, Kim, because
Don't
like I
be
just
scared. Don't be
I'm
scared.
scared
Don't be
because
scared.
like I just said, your repressed one is the one that you sort of kind of can shrug off and sort of be like, that's fine. Um and yeah, that would be an interesting ball game if my partner one day was a my repressed one is actually social. And so that would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the subtypes we are big fans of the subtypes on this podcast because they do open up so much. We're not going to get into this, but if you really get into the world of subtypes, there's all these things called countertypes. There's
Yeah.
things that like certain numbers, because they are that subtype, can
Yeah.
actually look like another type, which is why
Yeah.
sometimes typing can get confusing. So that's a whole ball game. But I'm of a camp, speaking of like opinions on the Enneagram, I value the subtype way more than the wing, where mostly in Enneagram worlds, you hear people talk about their wing more,
Mhm.
especially the pop culture sort of Enneagram world.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
really hear about the wings. And I really value the subtype thing because I think it really opens it up more, adds more nuance to the number, and to the way that that number shows up.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, you're missing, in my opinion, you're missing a lot if you don't understand the subtypes. If you don't understand your subtype, it's a whole level of understanding that you're missing out on.
Yeah, yeah. The subtypes stay static, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Subtypes stay static.
Right. So wings can flex, subtypes stay the same. So that's something as well to think about. All right.
So
Yes.
yeah, we said it was going to be
Deep
me.
breath.
Um, so how is it used? Um, we've talked about being clinicians and how we use this in practice. Um, and personally, how the Enneagram can be an amazing tool for just your own self growth, self discovery, um, work. I don't know what else to add about it. How we
No.
use it.
Yeah, we use it. We use it in so many ways. Um,
You hot?
and it can be used. What'd you say?
Are you hot?
Yeah, I'm hot.
Me too.
This conversation gets me all
I
fired
think it's
up.
getting hot, and I think it's getting hot in here because it's saucy.
So yeah, how it's used, how do we use it? I mean, the ways are sort of endless of how it can be used and how we use it. I feel like though, I'm going to jump to this part. How do we not use it? Right? Like, what are some of the ways to not use the Enneagram? And this can fall into the category of pet peeves when it comes to the Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my biggest pet peeves, I'll start, is is typing other people. And I think you kind of already mentioned this, typing other people and typing people that we don't know. So it is a fun game. I will not deny that. It is a fun game to type like TV characters and celebrities. But we don't know them and we don't know their motivations. So I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of this. I love to think like, I think they might be this, but I'm not going to say that as fact or truth. I might have a conversation with someone about be like, maybe this or maybe that. But I don't know because we don't know them. So, and like we said earlier, only the person can really be the one that says what number they are. So trying to be respectful of that when we're typing, even if we're just playing around, that we're typing.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah. But it is fun, but not something to be done super seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that probably lends to like what one of my pet peeves is, and that's just taking for granted the depth that using this tool can bring. So just staying superficial is a pet peeve of mine. And I think kind of what goes along with that is when you have people who are just kind of stuck or they're comfortable with kind of excusing some of their behaviors with their type, so well, that's just I'm an 8, that's just the way I am, or I'm a 1, that's just the way I am. I'm like, no, I mean the whole point in figuring out what your type is so that you can grow, and so that you can understand how actually you're not you're that's not who you are. And so what's going on here, what's happening in this situation, and how can you how can you rise above that, or how can you grow through that. So just settling and just saying, well, that's just kind of excusing behaviors with your type.
Yes.
That's quite I kind of grind my gears.
Yeah. Another one of my pet peeves is kids. So is typing kids because kids are still developing and they're still figuring out themselves and how they are in the world. And so we don't know yet what number a kid is. Again, I think that in fun, sometimes people will say, oh, they might be a this or they seem like this. But again, not saying that's gospel truth because we don't know yet. And the person gets to call their own shots. And I think that most folks really say that the number fully develops kind of in those early 20s, um, late adolescence, right? So that's where you're really going to see it really come out. And so again, if you're typing a 6-year-old, they've got a long way to go. But yeah, I mean, if you're a curious adult, you might have some ideas, but it's probably not solid yet.
Yeah. I just realized a important point that we may have missed is, and that's so I believe that we have all 9 types in us. That's why we refer to your dominant type. So you may very well see aspects of yourself or relate to all 9 types. And so with that, I think it can totally be okay to keep that in mind when you are studying other people or trying to get to know other people and you're using this tool, with that, like kind of embracing that notion that we all can have characteristics or aspects of all 9 types in us. So going back to what you're just saying about kids, As long as you're not trying to type your child or type a
Mhm.
child, it's okay if you can see characteristics or elements of a 4 or elements of a 3 or elements of a 5, because again, we all have all of those types in us.
Mhm.
But to try to type a child or anyone, again, just to reiterate, that is, for us, in our opinion, it's not okay.
It's not okay. It's
Not
not okay.
okay.
We're not here from it.
Not here for it.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Any other pet peeves? I think
yes.
obviously like we're here because a pet peeve is that it's really white.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
so that's a pet peeve.
It
And I
is.
think that again, when you're talking about we all have parts of different numbers in us, I think, and what we're so excited to jump into in this whole podcast series is that uh because of race, because we're black and take up a certain uh place in the world, that there might be parts of our dominant type that we really try and tame down or tone down, or we really try and pump up because
Yeah.
of the social structure. And so a key would be, to really not take that into consideration when we are talking about certain types, that this might look totally different for a black male or a black female, or just even a
Absolutely.
person of color, really.
Absolutely.
It could look totally different for someone who immigrated to the US. It could be totally different for someone, just again, of a different social place in our country. So that's a pet peeve, is not looking at the whole context of the person and the number and how it shows up in this world and how it can show up honestly maybe sometimes in a dangerous way.
Mhm.
And so for someone who is trying to be safe, they might
Mhm.
actually tone down some parts of that
Mhm.
personality.
That's such a good point, Camille.
Mm-hmm.
I would say stopping at your type.
Yep.
So not learning about all 9 types.
Mm.
Going back to the point that it's it's a good idea to, because we have all 9 types in us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, going back to the relationship piece and the whole point of this particular episode and helping you understand how the types, that they're connected, that there's connection within the system. And so how they relate to one another. You miss all of that when you're only focused on learning about and reading about your type.
Any frequently asked questions when we've covered all of this stuff around the Enneagram, all the different access points, the triads, the subtypes, pet peeves. What are some of the questions we sometimes hear from folks when they're first learning this, and how can we
Yeah.
maybe answer some of them?
Yep. So how do you've touched on changes. So does your number change, and how do you come to be your type? Um, I think you should answer that one.
So your number does not change. What like once you figure out your dominant number and you're, from when you were in your 20s or so, that's your number. And it stays the same. So it's not like you can be yeah, I was a 2 and then I was a 5. No.
Mhm.
And it also, with does your number change, you also, part of that, you can only be one number, right? Like you have, like she said, you have multiple numbers in you, parts of numbers in you, but
Mhm.
you can't be a 2 and a 5. You're just a 2, or you're a 5.
Mhm.
So those would be some frequently, like those are 2 questions. Can I be multiple numbers, and does my number change?
Yeah.
All right. So that's a pretty comprehensive deep dive into what is the Enneagram. I think we
I,
did that, Kim,
I hope we did. I hope it was comprehensive.
but
Uh,
not too stressful.
Definitely hope if you're stressed, take some breaths. Take some deep breaths. Take a
And
walk. And
take a walk.
remember, take your time. Yeah.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do so our next episode, we are going to jump into a number, one specific number, and we're going to talk about what that number is and how race intersects with it, and how there can be places of growth for that number. So if this felt like a lot, don't worry. We're going to walk
Yes.
through all the numbers.
That's it right there. The learning is going to keep on coming. We'll continue to we'll continue to teach and try to do our best to help this system make sense, in addition to the really important conversations that we're excited about having, that we feel are missing in this space. But yes, we're going to try to take a lot of this, and it'll be possibly easier to digest and understand as we're talking about each type, which I'm so excited about.
I am so excited. So, Kim, where can folks find you if they want to learn more about you?
Folks can find me on Instagram at KReeseLCSW. Folks can find me at my practice on Instagram, and that is at the Reese Collective, or online at www.kimberlyreeselcsw.com. What about you? Where can they find you?
Folks can find me on Instagram at camille.logan.lcmhc. And they can also find my practice website at www.thekccollective.com. And Kim, where can people find the both of us?
They can find us at Enneagram for the Culture on Instagram or Facebook. And you can check us out online at enneagramfortheculture.com.
Bye.